Welcome to Forum 360 on Fusion, your PBS channel. I'm Stephanie York, your host today. Thank you for joining us for a global outlook with a local view. Today we are talking with Susan Stone and Kristina Supler, law partners at Kohrman Jackson and Krantz located in Cleveland. These two dynamic attorneys head up the law firm's Student and Athlete Defense Practice Group, a niche practice that is getting nationwide attention. Susan and Kristina will explain how Title IX and the MeToo movement have changed the college campus climate and how parents have to keep up and change the conversation. The old birds and bees talk won't cut it anymore. Consent has a new meaning, and you won't believe the various high-risk behaviors teenagers and college students engage in on a regular basis. So let's find out more about KJK's Student and Athlete Defense Practice Group and why you should attend one of Susan's and Kristina's edgy talks, which they do throughout the year. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on Forum 360.
Thanks for having us, Stephanie.
Yes, of course.
Really excited today.
And we're excited to have you, too. So let's start. If each of you could tell a little bit about yourself, your background, how you ended up heading up Kohrman Jackson and Krantz's Student and Athlete Defense Group.
Sure. Susan, let's start.
Well, a couple years ago, we were at another law firm, and my background was in special education law and general civil litigation, and Kristina came aboard in the law firm, and she has a criminal defense background, and we found that more of our cases had an interesting crossover, and we started working together, and from there, our practice just blossomed.
Right. For years, I was doing criminal work, criminal defense work exclusively, and I met Susan, and just over time, there was an organic melding of the work she was doing on behalf of students, as well as this work that I was doing, and the rest is history.
You know what, Stephanie, what's interesting about our practice is that it has, under this whole umbrella of student and athlete defense, there are so many different areas that we take care of and really serve our clients, who are everything from the beginning of their educational career all through postdocs and professors. So we're dealing with special education issues, we deal with Title IX issues, we deal with transition planning for students who are on the spectrum and they're going to college having issues, we deal with research misconduct of scientists, and plagiarism, academic dishonesty, and then all of a sudden misconduct. So everything from a student threatening to shoot a school to drugs and alcohol.
Right, so it runs the gamut, and that was what I was going to ask you to discuss. What types of clients, and you've laid it out really nicely. So we're going to focus the first part of this interview on allegations of student sexual misconduct, because that seems to be what the media likes to grab onto. You know, it's salacious, it gets out there, and people talk about it a lot. How you help parents and students navigate this world when they're, they put their trust in you. Tell me, when you get a call about allegations of student sexual misconduct, who calls you usually?
Well, that's a great question. In our practice, we see the gamut of things. We have plenty of phone calls that come in from a college student, for example, who's in crisis, saying, oh my goodness, I just got this letter, what do I do, help? But we also receive calls from parents who have just gotten a phone call from their own child, and it's a parent's worst nightmare, saying, please help, my son, perhaps daughter, has been accused of sexual misconduct, there's a Title IX proceeding, the police want to talk to him, what do we do?
You know, the other source of referrals that come to us is that parents will go to their trusted advisors. So we've had people go to their accountant or their corporate lawyer, and those professionals then try to find out who can help my client. So really the calls come in from various sources, but it all leads to helping a student.
Right, and so when you get this call, I imagine there's a lot of emotions on the other end of the phone. I mean, they're scared, they're nervous, they're frustrated. I mean, part of this is a little bit of counseling along with the legal work, I would imagine.
Oftentimes, we are receiving a call from someone who's absolutely at the lowest point in their lives. It's parents who are just devastated and terrified because they want to protect that which they love most, their child. And so we do consider ourselves counselors in the sense that we're legal advisors, but we also have to often provide additional supports for our clients, whether it's connecting them to a mental health professional, an academic advisor, some sort of other person who can help. We pride ourselves on taking really a holistic approach to meeting our clients' needs and working with other professionals.
And just having us as a team, you know, I think it helps that we're both mothers. That cannot be overlooked. Christina has younger children. I have 2 in college and 1 still in middle school. And I think that with our grasp of what is normal childhood development, where are students at different age and stage. You know, you hear the phrases ages and stages, that really plays out in our practice. And also having both of our personalities. We pride ourselves that you don't just get one of us. There's 2 of us on a case. And not only do we try to provide support for the student, but we recognize that when something happens to a child, it becomes a family issue.
It really does, and it's really nice you have those outside supports and that you can link people up, because it is a holistic view, and you're not just dealing with one issue, you know, one emotion.
That's
you have,
right.
You know, the whole family involved typically. So, so because you deal with many college students in this space, and athletes particularly, can you briefly explain Title IX and the MeToo movement and how this all has changed the landscape in the last, 5 years maybe?
Yeah, you've asked a really loaded and packed
Big question.
Right? There's a lot to pack. There's the whole issue
So
of
break it up
representing.
however you want.
Yeah, let's break it up and let's have a conversation about this, because we deal with students, but we deal with students who maybe are from other countries and they're here on a student visa, and they're terrified that if they are expelled from their school, they will have to go back to their country and deal with the shame and being deported and all the legal issues that surround that issue. We deal with athletes, so we're not just worrying about student issues, but we're dealing with NCAA-ish rules and regulations, and we're wrestling with those different intricacies, like, well, how is this going to affect their athletic career, especially when a collegiate career is only 4 years. And then we deal with students on the spectrum who are getting in trouble.
And I would say that within those categories of students whom we're seeing, bring into that then the added layer of the MeToo movement, and how has that reverberated across college campuses nationwide and really internationally. And MeToo has brought a greater awareness, I think, to students on college campuses about issues surrounding what is consent, what is sexual assault, students speaking out about whatever their experiences have been. And what we're seeing is that as there's been greater and greater discussion and education about consent, Title IX, all of those important issues, believe it or not, there's actually, wouldn't you agree, greater confusion about what sexual assault is and isn't, what consent should actually look like.
Because the problem is that there's a definition and there's orientation and there's training, but how that plays out
in real time in a sexual experience.
Right, after a few drinks, and it's usually at 2 in the morning, and you're in somebody's dorm room and things happen.
Right.
How do you apply those big legal definitions or policy definitions to real life?
How do you do that?
So we often, when we're speaking with groups of parents and other students, it may sound a little bit, I don't know, silly or juvenile, but it's actually very apropos. Sexual experience on today's college campuses actually really should look like a game, not a game, but look like red light, green light. Okay. Meaning at every stage of the sexual interaction, there should be a question, may I? And it should be met with an answer, yes, no. So may I place my hand on your breast? May I take your shirt off? So on and so forth. And there really does need to be this incremental check-in at every stage. And as soon as someone says no, or perhaps even if someone doesn't say yes, at that point, then it's really important to reevaluate whether the sexual experience should continue or whether it should stop.
Yeah, and I need to add something. We've had students recently, because everyone's so well trained, they've done that, Stephanie.
Really?
They've asked, may I take your clothes off? May we have intercourse? But then what happens is that the other person feels like the policy's been violated or the law has been violated because they felt like they had too much to drink. And there's a difference between intoxicated and incapacitated. You can consent if you're just intoxicated. You cannot consent if you were incapacitated. But the problem is, what does the word drunk mean? I was drunk. Is drunken. Which box does it fall in?
Right. And I got to tell you, just hearing this, I'm just like, my head's swarming because I haven't had that talk, being mother may I, basically, can I do this, can I do that conversation with my kids, which seems to be crucial now. Like, that is not how we were brought up, you know, to ask that. And that is not how even my kids were brought up, even though now they should be. Now I should be saying, hey, you don't go past XYZ until you get a verbal, this is okay.
So Susan and I have been big proponents when speaking with parents about this idea of really updating the sex ed talk that we give to our children now, and more traditional talks that had focused on STDs or contraception, those sorts of issues. Still very important, but it's just a little bit out of touch with what we're seeing in our case is the actual sexual experiences that students are encountering on campus and the tough issues that students are wrestling with. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
I think that also what is happening is that students are looking to the Title IX office or campus police to also navigate sexual experiences, and listen, Kristina and I are big proponents on reporting. If you think you are a victim of sexual assault, you should go forward and you will report. But there needs to be a better understanding of what is a reportable offense versus what is regret.
We're seeing in many of our cases, unfortunately, it's situations where two students have had a sexual encounter and then for whatever reason the relationship deteriorated, or maybe there wasn't ever even a relationship to begin with, and students are turning to campus Title IX offices or sometimes even campus police to navigate internal conflict and,
how
social
they're feeling and how should they deal with this now.
We also see an uptick on mental health disorders, and how that's playing out in our practice not only impacts our college students but our high school students. And we're seeing a lot more depression, serious debilitating depression, a lot more anxiety. We've dealt with many cases where students go to college and they're really suffering. And sometimes when students are suffering, and then you throw in drugs and alcohol and sex,
very dangerous.
It's a lethal cocktail, and it's really making things more complicated.
Yes, I mean, I can't, my kid just went to college, so now in my head swarming what I need to do for him right now, right this second. I'm going to get off the phone.
But I mean, it's an exciting time.
It
and
is
we want our
exciting.
children to go off and be happy and thrive and not have this fear or shadow over their heads. But I think it's just important to have an honest, candid conversation before they go off to college about some of the real world issues that they're going to be confronted with.
Right. So I just want to remind our viewers and those who may have joined late that we are here with attorneys Susan Stone and Kristina Supler from Kohrman Jackson and Krantz. We're discussing student and athlete defense, particularly allegations of sexual misconduct, and what can be done if your child has been accused of sexual misconduct. How to prevent your student from getting into these situations in the first place, having those discussions.
Right.
And we will dive into special education law in a little bit and touch on that for a minute.
It's a very important area and a proud area of our practice. We really like working with younger kids on these issues.
Yeah, yeah. So is there a particular time when our kids are most vulnerable to being caught in this sexual misconduct situation?
You're in it right now.
So there's this construct called the red zone. And basically what the red zone refers to is the period of time when students get on campus, late August sometime, through Thanksgiving, end of November. And during the red zone, there's a significant increase in reports of sexual assaults on college campuses. And we often, I think, see that perhaps students have been home all summer, living in their parents' homes with certain rules in place, and then you get back to campus, or maybe you're on campus for the first time, and the freedom sometimes is intoxicating.
No pun intended.
Right, there's no bedtime, there's no, or curfew, and
Right.
there's nobody watching and saying, where were you, what were you doing, did you engage in drugs or alcohol, things like that. There's not that.
Do you know what's really sad is that we see a lot of freshmen and they are up against a Title IX charge and looking at a potential suspension or worse, expulsion before they even get started. And and it's so sad. And it is really hard if you've been suspended or expelled from a school because of a Title IX allegation to transfer to another institution. It can be done, and we actually work with someone on our team to help students navigate that situation. But a lot of times when you read school policies, they say that they're not supposed to be like criminal courts. They're supposed to be pedagogical. But it is punitive. We have a case that we're about to file, so we're not going to give the details yet until we do file. Someone completed every bit of their coursework and were told that they were being investigated. At graduation, they walked across the stage without a diploma, and then after the graduation date, they were told that the diploma wouldn't be conferred upon them. What do? We're fighting. We're going to file on that case. Yeah.
Wow. That's a tough one. Well, they're all tough.
They're all tough
They're all
because,
tough.
we always say at the end of the day, we represent primarily respondents, so those who have been accused, but even for those who are complainants or otherwise known as accusers, in these cases, there's no one wins, no one comes out ahead. No matter what, you have two individuals whose lives have been permanently altered, and it's just a really unfortunate situation for everyone involved. These are not good cases.
So I think that our practice is a good example, Stephanie, because you brought up MeToo, and a lot of times Kristina and I are asked, how can we defend people accused of sexual assault? And we think of the positive and the fabulous aspects of MeToo. One is that we're two women who created a practice.
I was going right there, like two women defending people that are accused of sexual assault, typically males, Right. That's a little unusual. Tell me.
We get asked that a lot. Why don't you speak more on that?
No, we're asked all the time how we can do this, and Kristina is a former criminal defense and still is an excellent criminal defense attorney, and believing in the system and that everyone deserves a defense is how you come to the table. It's in your DNA.
Right. Something that we both feel so strongly about is that we're not trying to defend wrongdoers per se, but rather we're asking and demanding that the alleged wrongdoer, is treated fairly. So in other words, that whether it's a campus Title IX proceeding or a criminal investigation with law enforcement officers, we just want both the complainant and the respondent to be treated fairly and to be given an ample opportunity to provide his or her story about what happened.
Or just how about with Me Too movement, two women working together and creating a business together and being part of a firm as two female partners who have really forged ahead in an area that's so new. We think that's part of Me Too as well.
Absolutely. And you've gone nationwide with this story, right?
We have. Fortunately, we've had some good success with what we do, and so we have earned a reputation where we're being called upon to represent students and professionals nationwide.
That's awesome.
It's been wonderful.
That's great. It's really exciting. So I'm a parent, as we've discussed. I have a kid in college, a kid in high school, and a kid in middle school. What do I do right now if I get that call that one of my kids was accused of sexual misconduct?
Well, let's break it down,
please.
Okay, because how you handle things with a middle schooler, and I have a middle schooler, is got to be very different. So,
okay, let's just do the college kid.
Yeah, let's start with the college kid.
If that's, well, it's not
Probably
gonna happen,
the more
but-
typical scenario.
Right, and the situation you guys probably see more often.
Well, actually, no.
That's not.
I don't know.
Really?
We've had a lot more high school kids calling us with their parents that there have been allegations of sexual misconduct, and lately, I don't know if it's in the water, we've been representing middle school kids with what I would call sexual misconduct allegations that are more that you would see in the middle school years. We've had some very bizarre. So I have to correct you on that.
Yeah,
It
I'm
seems
glad
like
you did.
our society is very nervous, as it should be, about sexual assault and sexual misconduct, but the labels we're using, and when we're, especially for middle school
Right.
children, are very profound.
Well, they're very serious, and you're
And
thinking,
it follows you.
Right.
which is very scary. So I'm glad you brought this up because I really don't need to know what I need to do because I know I'll just call you if I get in that situation. So that's cool. But
But let's talk about it.
But
Sure.
I want the fact that I had that misnomer that this happens in college. I'm sure our viewers also likewise had that
Right.
misnomer, and so I'm glad that it's been clarified. But I can see where actions in middle school, although not the same sexual conduct that you would see in college. But I mean, I don't know. What is it?
So, I mean, I'll
give me some examples.
Sure,
Give a
of
good
course.
example. We have a lot to choose
I would
from,
say with our
unfortunately.
middle schoolers, we're often seeing sexual allegations involving cell phones and photos.
Okay,
So sexting, and photos make their way around school like wildfire. And I
they
think
do.
a lot of the students, and frankly teachers and administrators as well, struggle with how to respond. What should a school district advise students to do? What should be communicated to parents? So a lot of cell phone, social media type issues.
Right.
But then also I would say just issues dealing with
Bullying.
Right.
sexual harassment, that sort of thing.
And we wouldn't have called it sexual harassment
No,
10
do you
years
remember
ago.
like when someone, and I'm just using a very basic, snap the bra of the girl?
That's a great example.
You would
Yeah.
say, oh, he must like you. That's what
Right.
parents would say. He must like you if he's teasing you like that. And nowadays,
That's right.
the conversation is completely different.
Very different discussion. Yes.
I'm going to give you an example of what
Please.
could happen in high school or college. It's so funny how 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it would have been looked at very different. Couple breaks up, okay? One person says to the other person, I never want to talk to you again, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Not unusual.
Yeah.
The person who's broken up with texts, I miss you, in the middle of the night, I love you, I want to see you, can I see you in the library?
Please, please,
Please,
please.
please, I love you.
Talking.
Bingo.
Today it's stalking. Do you remember that crazy movie, Say Anything?
Yes. That
Lloyd
was stalking.
Dollar, That was stalking.
And that was a great
Yeah.
movie. Like,
So we actually
Now
wrote a
it's-
piece not too long ago analyzing that classic 80s movie, Say Anything, through the lens of today, Title IX and MeToo. And we come to the conclusion, exactly what you indicated. In today's day and age, Lloyd would be charged with stalking.
Yes,
he would be
would.
facing a criminal investigation, campus Title IX proceedings. He'd probably be disciplined and removed from his campus. And it's just so interesting that when you look through the same behavior through a different historical lens, the different outcomes and labels that you ascribe.
so I'm going to ask this loaded question because are we better off today because of that or not?
I think it depends on the facts of the case.
Yeah.
I think we have to look at each case and say, are we better off today than we were? In a case where someone's just snapping a bra strap, I wish we'd go back and say a detention and a good conversation and why that's not appropriate.
Right.
Maybe a situation where someone's really hurting from a bad breakup. We'd like to see more mental health services be given. But obviously, if someone's passed out or incapacitated and someone tries to engage in sexual contact, they should be punished much more severely than they would have in the past.
Look, on the one hand, it's a wonderful thing to encourage and empower our children to speak out
Absolutely.
in any situation where there's any sort of wrongdoing. On the other hand, unfortunately, what we're seeing is too many scenarios where institutional processes are being manipulated for one's own personal agenda versus a situation that was intentional harassment or assault or God forbid,
Right.
worse.
Right. So, yes, depends on every different scenario, which is why it's so important to seek people that know how to navigate these waters.
So
how do you navigate them by yourself?
Stephanie, if God forbid someone calls their parent and says that I think I'm going to be accused of sexual misconduct, we'd like to give simple advice. Number one, don't talk to anybody but your parent and allow them to find appropriate help.
Secondly, we always advise in a situation to make sure you hold on to your social media, your text messages,
Right.
anything on the cell phone could be evidence, good or bad. You never know.
Right.
And finally, just to make it 3 good tips and to keep it simple, don't talk to anybody. Don't talk to a police officer. Don't talk to a representative from the school until you've had a chance to get some help, because anything you say obviously can be used against you, right?
That's really good advice. And we didn't get to talk about special education law. So can I leave it open that maybe I can have you guys back to talk about that sometime?
Oh, it would be our pleasure.
Thank you. This went too fast.
Okay, so we now know that the conversations we are having with our kids about and surrounding sex are not good enough. We must change the conversation. We learned a little bit about what we should be discussing in order to help our teens avoid trouble on campus and in the criminal justice system. Today, we talked with Susan Stone and Kristina Supler, law partners at Kohrman Jackson and Krantz, a law firm located in Cleveland. And wow, do I have a lot to talk about with my kids tonight? I'm Stephanie York, your host today. Thank you for joining us on Forum 360, sponsored by the Knight and Akron Community Foundations and the Jewish Community Board of Akron. On Fusion, your PBS channel.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.